How do we know what color dinosaurs were? How do you know? I'll tell you. So there's a few different ways that you can figure out what color a dinosaur could have been. Now, paleontologists will take samples of fossils and they will put them underneath a microscope and they will look for something called melanosomes. Now, I have melanosomes, you have melanosomes, he, she, me, we got melanosomes. I've also heard it be pronounced melanosomes. That sounds better. I'm gonna say melanosomes. Melanosomes. So in this article by Riley Black and from the Natural History Museum of Utah, fossils that preserve melanosomes in skin or feathers are relatively rare and can take a long time to study in detail. And while melanosomes can help us detect some colors such as black, gray, reddish brown, and iridescent, there are some parts of the dinosaur color range we can't quite detect. As it says in the article, there's a very specific range of color that paleontologists can find using that microscope method. And obviously that's not a lot of color, right? But not all dinosaurs were that color. They couldn't have been. Look at birds today, and those are dinosaurs. Paleontologists have found fossils with those pigment cells intact, with feathers and skin. And what are those dinosaurs, you might ask? Well, let's go through them, shall we? Now, this isn't going to be all of them, but there are a few notable ones that are pretty famous. Sinosauropteryx, Microraptor, Psittacosaurus, Anchiornis, and Borealopelta. Now, each of those dinosaurs, again, had to be buried in very specific conditions. This is extremely rare and doesn't really happen a lot. A great example is Borealopelta. This is the fossil that we found. You can't really see it here, but the eyelids are fossilized. When this dinosaur died, it possibly did something called a bloat and float. Bloat and float means it died, and then the gases on the inside, when an animal dies, started to inflate the body in whatever water and sediment that it lived or that it died in, began to make this dinosaur float and flip upside down. Now, the reason why it was upside down is, well, look at all that. That weighs a lot more than guts. So when the dinosaur was upside down, it fossilized like that. The back was perfectly buried as quick as it possibly could and preserved all of that beautiful skin, the keratin on the spines and the osteoderms is what they're normally called. The eyelids, the face, yes, is sunken in, so you can see the skull, but all of that is skin. There's no bone around here except for the osteoderms. There's skin there. Like, that's crazy. I heard that when the paleontologists were digging it out and they were trying to study it, it was really hard to understand what it could have been and how to study it because it's got skin. It's got that outer shell of stuff that paleontologists aren't exactly used to. They're not used to skin and being able to see the animal basically what it looked like when it was alive. They're used to just bones. But let's go back to melanosomes for a second, shall we? So melanosomes or melanosomes here, fossil dinosaur right there. All those black splotchy spots, those are feathers. And so paleontologists will use that. They will zoom in on those feathers and they will look for melanosomes or melanosomes, which are right here. There they are. Now, finding what specific shape and size depends on what color the cell would be. So as we can see up here, melanosomes and bacteria are generally in the same size, so they kind of look the same. So it would be it's really kind of difficult to distinguish bacteria and some melanosome cells. So paleontologists do kind of have a little bit of a difficult job when they're trying to do. But as we can see up here, melanosomes are they have the different shapes that I was talking about. So they have the reddish melanosomes, they're shaped like little meatballs, and then the black and white ones are shaped like little sausages. So again, similar to bacteria. So when scientists take that sample, they're looking at only the highlighted areas around the fossil here, the feathers, and like Borealopelta, the skin. And those shapes are what they're looking for. Now, this is Sinosauropteryx. So when they were looking at the feathers here, they were able to figure out that the cell shapes were that meatball sized. They were that meatball shape. So we have those nice reds, almost browns, rusty orangey colors, right? And then underneath, they were able to find the tube-shaped ones, or the bacteria-shaped ones, that resemble white and black. And a fun little fact about Sinosauropteryx is that they found that the tail was banded. It had white, red, orange, white, red, orange, as they were finding those cells. And kind of like tigers, who use their stripes to kind of blend in with the grasses that they lived in, Sinosauropteryx may have done the exact same thing with its tail. Now, I know you guys can see those claws, so this thing was definitely a predator, but it wasn't very big, so obviously that means it may have been prey for something else. So having that kind of camouflage would allow it not only to sneak up on its prey, but to be able to sneak around, be a little sneaky guy, and kind of stay away from danger. And now you're probably wondering, okay, well, how do we know about like T-Rex or about Velociraptor? Well, let's talk about Velociraptor, shall we? So as we know, the Jurassic Park Velociraptor is not what Velociraptor actually looked like. Velociraptor was completely feathered, head to toe. How do we know this? Well, in the forearms, there are these things called quill notches. So those are where the big flight-looking feathers, like quills, would attach to the bone to be able to stay in place. You can see the same thing on turkey vulture bones. So that means it was feathered, right? Well, it lived in the desert. So if you're going to look at what Velociraptor probably looked like, you're gonna have to look at desert animal. It lived in the Gobi Desert, well, what's the Gobi Desert now, in Mongolia. Now, I would say a good example of a desert bird is a roadrunner. Roadrunners kind of have a speckled brown, white, black kind of coloring to them, right? Pretty much all the colors we could pick up from our microscopes and finding out those shaped cells, right? The melanosomes. Unfortunately, we don't have any preserved feathers of Velociraptor, but we do have this really, really good fossil. So this is the best preserved fossil of Velociraptor and Protoceratops. So here's a better angle of what the fossil looks like. So as you can see, these guys must have been buried very quickly in order for this to preserve, and sand is relatively good at preserving fossils, but when they're exposed, the winds and the graininess of sand can really damage fossils. So this is an incredible find. So we don't have any melanosomes for Velociraptor, but as we know, it does live in the desert, so you got to think of those desert birds, like I said, roadrunner. So you could also look at some other desert birds. You'll see whites, you'll see blacks, you'll see, you know, some kind of gray. You know, they're not really colorful, are they? Now, does that mean that they didn't have any vibrant colors like this Microraptor? Not necessarily, but they could have had maybe some yellow. Maybe they had a little bit of red around the face. Maybe they had some green around the face. It all kind of depends, but you know, you just got to look at what we have today for that kind of stuff. Now, is that 100% accurate? No, but it works. Melanosomes, they're important, but they're not easy to find. So the next time you're thinking to yourself, what did this dinosaur look like? What color was it? Just refer to this video. Think about what you learned today. Now, does the dinosaur already have melanosomes that have been found, that have been fossilized, where paleontologists will be able to see them? If they don't, where did the dinosaur live? Was it a tropical area? Was it an arid area? Was it in the Badlands? Was it, you know, in kind of like a field? Like, where did it live? That'll give you a better idea of what it probably could have looked like. Look at birds and animals today that are relatives or that resemble the same niche, as in like a lion is kind of a top predator and a gazelle is a prey animal. Those are two niches. So think of animals that fit the niche for that dinosaur. You think about that, and I think you might know what color dinosaurs might be.